Hello ladies and gentlemen, my previous video of how to find your niche market got a lot of love and I continue to get asked questions of how I find items to profit off of, so I figured I'd make a follow-up video for the new Runes of Alder League. Let's hop into it. Alright, so to preface this video, I want to state that I haven't really made that many crafting videos this league because I haven't really wanted to share methods I don't think will actually be useful to you. Crafting this league took a hard hit and you basically craft everything the same way with the exception of a few things like jewels where there's already tons of videos out on regarding that. I've released some videos showing uniques I've profited off of, mainly as a reminder like, hey, there's other ways to make profits off of these things other than actually making rare items like +2 melee gloves or whatever. I try to make them informational and concise simply because I have fun doing it and I hope it helps you guys make some currency and you take something away from it other than just Loba Q, buy this unique, buy. He did this, get fire, I want fire, I must copy exactly like him to get fire. Caveman analogy, but I think you get the point. I can make a video on crafting every single item, like look at how much profit I made, and sure it might be profitable for me, but all rares are crafted basically the same way, so once I release a video, profits won't be as good and you're basically going to break even until you get one lucky hit, and that's essentially crafting most rare items this league. You craft a bunch until you get a good hit, and with the amount of time it takes you, you could literally just go kill a boss like Kulamak a few times and make triple the profits. Of course, there are still plenty of great methods out there, but I want to give you guys the playbook of how to do it so you can have your own profiting item. What you do with the playbook is entirely up to you. With all of that being said, I do want to clarify that in this video, when I say crafting, I generally mean anything you can profit off of, whether it be valuing uniques, reforging, selling bases, etc. Let me know your guys' feelings about these sort of, I guess, yap sessions at the beginning as to just kind of give you guys an idea where my head's at. I typically leave them out since I figured no one cares, but making profits in PoE 2 does come with a specific mindset, so leave a comment or like the video so I know your feelings about this segment. Negative comments are welcome as well, you won't hurt my feelings. Okay, now the video is starting. First things first, we'll talk about 3 main points in order and then we will go over them with some examples. Let's start with the first big question I always get asked. How do you know something is valuable? I've said it before and I'll say it again, experience plays a huge role here. The more you've played, the more you know. However, it's not 100% needed to make profits. Whether you want to admit it or not, content creators play a huge role in the market because as a build gets more popular, prices go up because there's a larger demand for those items. Most of my profit crafting videos simply come from me making items I need for my own build. For example, the Shavron's unique belt is one of my favorite uniques and I always use it, but I needed additional resists so I wanted a corrupted one with resist. I went to buy one this league and I saw the prices of what people were charging for a corrupted one versus the actual cost of an uncorrupted one and was like, well, I'll just do a bunch until I get what I want and sell the rest because it's way cheaper to do so. And in the end, I made a video about the profits. Therefore, step 1 is to find a popular build that has items that are needed. It's also important to note that some builds are so popular that the market becomes oversaturated with items. So I advise off-meta builds if you're trying to craft for just profiting purposes. The next big question I always get is, will it actually sell, or how do you know it will sell? You only have however many divines and you don't want to burn them on something that won't sell. This is where your mindset comes into play. Stop acting broke. You want thousands of divines but aren't willing to risk 5? That's like putting $500 in Apple stock and expecting $100,000 in a week. It ain't gonna happen. I'm not saying use all of your divines on whatever method. I'm saying set aside however many divines you're willing to risk and try to profit off of one of those items you found from those build guides. It's like the saying goes, something is only worth what someone is willing to pay. So you'll never know if an item will sell for a mirror if you don't try in the first place. Sometimes you can just profit off of people's stupidity because they don't know any better. And a lot of times people heavily underestimate how wealthy some of these players are. This leads me into my next important topic, which is evaluating your risk. Yeah, I know this sounds like some nerd where I'm basically talking about risk portfolios and I'm an investment banker, but it's true. There are always guaranteed ways to make profits, like literally slamming white bases. I have a whole video going over where I show guaranteed profits slamming white gold amulet bases, and that method is still viable right now and will always be viable because it's boring. People don't want to do all the tedious bullshit to make like 50 divines, even though it costs only 5 divines. However, if you're willing to take the time, it's profits for you that you can then use until you can do higher margin crafts. The important thing is you have to determine how much you're willing to spend because for most methods, you have to be able to perform multiple trials of whatever you're doing until you get your successes. Let's use those gold amulets again as an example. If you go and buy 10 white gold amulets and slam them all and don't hit anything good, you've now lost 100 exalts or whatever. But you can't say that method is trash, you just didn't do enough trials. If you went and did, say, 200 trials and it cost you 5 divines, but you hit one with +3 projectiles that sells for 30 divines, you've now made 25 divines divines, and that's just one amulet. Essentially, you have to have enough currency to play with to cover the variance. Lucky or unlucky, you do it enough, probabilities will come into play and you will have some successes. Nevertheless, those successes need to outweigh all of your costs so you make profits. This is my final point, which is cost analysis. Before you start, you need to quickly identify whether a success will cover the cost of a failure. For those 200 gold amulets you slammed at a total of cost of 5 divines, if you hit only one with +3 projectiles and it only sells for 2 divines, it's clearly not worth it. Now, these aren't actual selling prices and I'm just using them as examples, so before you start, you need to calculate a rough estimate of the cost of a craft along with how much a success will sell for. For things like white amulet bases, it can be quite easy to calculate. You buy 200 gold amulets at 10 exalts apiece, that's 4 divines. 1 + 3 melee skills is 6 divines, a +3 proj is 30 divines, +3 spell is 8 divines. Quite easy to tell there's profits there. However, some things are a little more difficult to calculate, like fracturing gloves with +2 melee skills and chaos spamming for something like attack speed. I'll go over how you can calculate those expected costs in my example, since fracturing and chaos spamming is the main way for crafting now, and it's the same for most everything, but the essential point is you need to do a quick check on the market to see currently listed items versus actual cost, because in the Runes of Alder League, most of the time it's about the same or cheaper to just buy the item due to how expensive chaos orbs and fracturing orbs are. For a quick summary, the steps to find an item you can make profits off of are as follows. Step 1, find a popular build that has a decent following but isn't extremely popular, strong but off meta. Step 2, evaluating your risk. How much are you willing to spend so you can decide the entry level you can afford when making the item? And step 3, cost and profit analysis. Determine roughly how much it will cost you to make an item and check how much that item will sell for before crafting. A lot of the times, it's not even worth your time because you'll break even when you could have just been farming. Now that all of that's settled, just a reminder to like the video and subscribe if you like this sort of content. You can always unsubscribe at any point, and it does help me in continuing to create these videos, so please do. Let's run through everything I just said with an example. We will look at all levels of an item since you can make profits at several points during a craft. What I mean by that is buying a normal item and selling it as a magic, making the item rare and fracturing it and just selling the fractured base, along with fully completing the item with chaos orbs and desecration. So the first question you always have to ask yourself is, what is the end goal of your craft? I'm currently rocking a martial artist twister build, but I've decided I want to change my build into a more melee focused build, so I need some +2 melee gloves. Currently, I'm rocking these, which have double flats, along with increased attack speed, critical damage bonus. I know from experience that I can guarantee attack speed, +2 melee skills, and then critical damage bonus as that is a crafted modifier, and then 1 desecrated prefix. And that is typically how you craft any item currently in the game. You fracture it to get that 1 guaranteed modifier, you chaos spam for the second modifier, and then for the third modifier, you typically use some sort of essence or alloy to guarantee a crafted modifier. And then the fourth modifier is typically your desecration, because you can always Omen of Light spam and constantly go back until you get the modifier you want. But then as for the other 2 modifiers, you basically just use Omen of Whittlings or pray you get lucky. Now, there are some exceptions to this, but for a majority of crafts, I think we can all agree that that is basically the standard way for crafting in Runes of Alder. However, if you are going for something like a mirror tier item, it's a little bit different because you have to use more Omen of Whittlings and you're investing in tons and tons of currency, but I'm not going to get into that as I don't think it applies to a majority of my viewers. So back to my gloves, again I want tier 1 attack speed, +2 melee skills, and then I can guarantee tier 2 critical damage bonus, and then some sort of flat damage. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull up my trade site, because that's my goal. So let's look for my goal first. So I'm just going to type in gloves, and then it needs to be item level 75 for tier 1 modifiers. You'll always want to have Craft of Exile or PoE2 database. I'll leave a link in the description, but this is just any random gloves. I just clicked on the first one that I saw, and then we can see that all of the tier 1 attacks are item level 75. Depending on what you're crafting, depends on what item level you need, and I have a whole tutorial going over this, so I'm not going to get too in depth on that, and I'll leave a link in the description to that UI as well as a tutorial. But the first thing you want to identify is make sure you're buying the correct item level and that you can roll the mods you want. So I want to be able to get tier 1 attacks, so that's item level 75, and we can see that I want tier 1 attack speed, which is level 60, tier 1 melee skills, which is 41, and then we also have tier 2 critical damage bonus, and tier 1 is 59, and tier 2 is 45. So I need at least item level 75 for my craft, and ideally I would want it to be exactly item level 75, because item level 76 or item level 78 will make sure that I get these, and if I ever wanted to use Omen of Whittlings, if I end up hitting those, my item's basically bricked. We won't be doing that because those bases are typically really expensive. So back to the trade site, we're going to look up for those melee skills for +2. Alright, so I've input all of the stats, so I have every modifier that I want, and then we'll look for any ones that have at least 1 flat damage, and then I have the item level 75. I want 2 augmentable sockets, and then I want it to be uncorrupted. And then also, I do not want it sanctified. Fractured is totally fine. So we can see the cheapest one is 140 divines, and this was listed yesterday, and they have 2 flat damages along with increased energy shield, tier 1 attack speed, so roughly 100 divines is what I'm looking at. So that means my completed sale will be 100 divines. So let's look at a normal base with 2 sockets. So normal, I'm just going to remove everything. Item level 75, uncorrupted. It doesn't matter what base, it can be strength for me. It doesn't really matter because I'm a martial artist, and that's typically how it is this league. But we can see it's quite cheap. It's 38 exalts, but I'd have to buy a decent amount of these until I get either +2 melee skills or tier 1 attack speed. So let's just look at the magic base level. And let's look at the +2 melee skills. We can see that it's 19 divines for any random base with 2 augmentable sockets. So clearly, since they're only 30, 40 exalts a pop, I can already tell that I could make a lot of currency just buying the normal bases and then selling them at the magic level. And I don't really have to move any farther when it comes to the cost analysis. And that's typically how it is for everything, unless someone happens to release a video specifically about one of those items, but that's typically how it is. Slamming normals to magic always makes you currency. We can see +2 melee skills is 19 divines. Like we saw, it's looking like I can guarantee sell mine for 100 divines. However, if I was to turn this rare and then go for a fracture, I have a 1 out of 3 chance to hit the +2 melee skills. So that means that I can only expect to hit that 1 out of every 3 times. So I need to triple that. I would need to buy at least 3, maybe even 4. So if I was to buy 3 of these, for example, that would be 60 divines just for the base. And then I need to take into consideration the 3 fracturing orbs. And if we go back to the game, let's walk up to Ange really quick and let's see what a fracturing costs. We could see a fracturing orb is roughly 6.5 divines. So that's, we'll just say 18. So that's already 18 divines plus 60. I'm already at a total cost of 78 divines, and that's just to get the fractured base. From this point, I could check the prices of gloves that have the +2 melee skills already fractured, and if they're less than 80 divines, it's better to just buy one. Most of the time, that's not the case, but you could always just sell them. Maybe there's a good margin too for you hitting fractures. Hitting the fracture is essentially the next break point to determine whether or not you should just buy one, as well as whether or not that's an actual profiting method. You could just fracture and sell, but sometimes you just don't want to do that, and it might be better to just buy the fracture. Off first glance, I can already tell that this isn't going to be quite profitable for me to do this, but I'm going to do it just so I can show you guys as an example and I go through the steps. So I'm going to pick up all of these bases. We're going to do one that's +2 melee skills, and I can also look at tier 1 attack speed because I think those are a little bit cheaper. So we have tier 1 attack speed. I can also get these, and we can see these are 10 divines, so these aren't as bad. I'll definitely pick up some of these then. We'll buy this one. Alright, so I bought 3 of the magic bases because I need to expect at least using 3 when I fracture. I'm only going to hit 1 of these, and I might not hit any of them. I could hit more, and that's great, but again, my expected value is 3 because I have a 1 out of 3 chance when I fracture, and we'll get into that. You would just calculate at least 3 of these. So we had those attack speeds, which were 10 divines, and then I bought this one for 19 divines. So we're looking at a total of roughly 40 divines just for my magic bases. Now I have to get 3 fracturing orbs and turn these all rare and then fracture them. So let's get 3 fracturing orbs really quick. Alright, so I got my 3 fracturing orbs. I have 4 here, and this is another 20 divines. So we're already at a 60 divine cost. So now I'm just going to turn these rares. I'm going to use a perfect regal orb just because I have a bunch. Make sure I use the other, fill them out. Alright. Alright, so now they have all 3 modifiers. So the next step you want to do is you want to desecrate so you can get that 1 out of 3 chance when you fracture. Since we're going to be chaos spamming, it doesn't really matter if we add a prefix or a suffix, but you can always target those if you want to, but we're just going to desecrate these now. And these preserved ribs aren't really worth anything. Now from this point forward, you just need to pray you get lucky. You just want to get that attack speed or the +2 melee skills fractured. It's a 1 out of 3 chance, so our expected value is to hit at least 1 of these. So let's fracture them. So we missed this one, we hit that one, and we missed that one. So we hit one at least, which is great. So we got the +2 melee skills, but now this is basically bricked. Sure, I could try to save it a little bit and desecrate and see what I get, and we can do that, but I'm just going to say that's a loss because typically when I'm calculating it beforehand, because again, whenever I do this, I'm doing everything before I actually do it. I'm just doing this so you guys learn. I'll probably put like a little warning here, but these calculations can and should be done beforehand, not while you're actually doing the craft. I'm just doing it while I'm doing the craft because I understand that a lot of people are visual learners. When I'm calculating this, I just consider this a loss. Now, of course, I can make some currency back when, pray I get lucky, but that's totally chance, and I never calculate this beforehand, so we're just going to count these as losses. So now from here, the next step is to use 2 Orbs of Annulment. Now, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the next step, and it's chaos spamming until you get the modifier you want, and everyone knows it feels like absolute. But to calculate how many Chaos Orbs it will actually take you is actually quite easy. So if we go to the Craft of Exile website, you just want to go to the gloves, for example, and then I have just dexterity gloves because they're evasion based. And then the first thing you want to do is input your item level. So if you go into the game, just look at what item level you have. Mine is level 81, which is definitely not ideal, but it is what it is. So you'll just type in item level 81. So now it will update to all of the chances that you can actually get, because some modifiers you can't get. But at item level 81, you can get basically everything except for the tier 1 resistances. So our total weightings are here down here at the bottom. And now I'm chaos spamming for tier 1 attack speed, which has a weighting of 500. So the probability of me getting tier 1 attack speed with every single chaos orb is 500 divided by the total 73,500 minus 750 because we already have +2 melee skills, so that I cannot get that modifier, so we have to take that out of the weighting, plus 63,700 because I can always roll prefixes whenever I use a chaos orb as well, and I'll put all of the math on the screen. But the chances are roughly 0.36%. Now, to find the amount of Chaos Orbs it will take you until you get that tier 1 attack speed is simply just 1 divided by that probability, because this is a geometric distribution, and all that means is how many failures until you get your first success. So I can expect to have 272.9, so 273 Chaos Orbs until I get tier 1 attack speed. Now, obviously, I could get very lucky and get it in 10, or I could get unlucky and it costs me something like 400 to 500 Chaos Orbs, but this is the expected value, and this is what I would use before buying anything and calculating the cost. So if we go back in game and we walk up to Ange again, let's look up how much 270 Chaos Orbs are. I'm sure it's a decent amount, so let's just type in. That's roughly 34 divines. So I'm already at an expected cost of 34 divines for the Chaos Orbs. We had those 3 fracturing orbs, which was 18 divines. So we're at 46 divines. And then all of these, again, were roughly 40 divines. So we're at 86 divine cost. And again, that is the expected cost. So I have an 86 divine expected cost. I haven't even Chaos Orb spammed, but that's my expected cost will be 86 divines. That 100 divine or that 140 divine gloves aren't looking too bad now to purchase, huh? I'm just kidding. That's just how it is sometimes, and hopefully you guys learn. However, if we just look at this base, since it's an evasion rating base, and let's just say we just want to look at the fractured +2 melee skills, and let's remove the grand bracers, so just make it regular gloves, we can see the cheapest one is 145 divines. I'll pull it up really quick. So this one is +2 melee skills, and it is 145 divines. So, but again, this is a little different because of the item level. So I could just sell the fractured base as is and make a little bit of profits, which is totally viable and a simple method that you can do. And sometimes you don't even have to calculate the Chaos Orbs. You can just calculate the cost of your fracturing orb. Now, I don't know if these are actually worth 140 divines, but that fractured base sometimes is more valuable just because people want to craft on their own. So I could just sell the fractured base as is, probably for around 120 divines. And the only reason why the fractured base is selling for more is because the ones that I initially looked at did not include that fractured base. That's the only reason why they're showing for more currency, even though that 140 divine gloves were pretty good. And I probably would have just bought those ideally and then Omen of Whittling, then hoped I got something good because it saves me a lot of time. But if I wanted to, I could just sell it at the fractured level and make some profits. Because again, my costs right now for this gloves alone were 60 divines. That was my expected cost. If I just sell it for 100 divines, that's already a 40 divine profit, and I don't have to Chaos Orb spam. But the next step is simple. You just take these Chaos Orbs. It feels awful, and it's going to take quite a lot of time. I'll probably just edit until I eventually get it, but you're just going for tier 1 attack speed. Alright, so we finally got the tier 1 attack speed, and it took me roughly 300 Chaos Orbs, which was about my expected value, so that's good and it makes a great example. The next step from here would be to just add your crafted modifier. Most of the time, adding your crafted modifier doesn't actually cost anything, so I typically don't even include it in my cost calculations because it's actually quite cheap to do. For this time, we're using an Essence of Hysteria, which is worth, I think, about a divine, and then we're going to be using one of the omens of the prefix, so we're going to be removing the prefix, and I also need to add a prefix. So the first thing you want to do is activate the Omen of Sinistral Exaltation for this one, because I'm going to be adding a prefix to remove it. Depending on what you're crafting, you might want to add a suffix and then remove the suffix. It's entirely up to what you're crafting. I'm going to be using a Greater Exalt here, because if I end up hitting something like a tier 1 flat, I might just add another one and just remove it, because you never know. So we hit maximum life. That's not ideal. So I'm just going to unactivate this. I do not need it anymore. And then I'm going to activate the Omen of Sinistral Crystallization along with the Essence of Hysteria. And this will guarantee that critical damage bonus. So now all of my suffixes are complete. I have the +2 melee skills, tier 1 attack speed, and critical damage bonus. And again, we used about 300 Chaos Orbs, and our total cost right now is roughly anywhere between 80 to 90 divines. And this is about the expected cost that I would have calculated before even doing this craft entirely, so you can do it beforehand, which is quite ideal. And now the next step is to basically just add your prefixes as well as desecrate one prefix. So for this one, I will be using an Ancient Rib because I do think it's worth it. It costs me 86 divines to get this thing. I can spend a little bit of currency on an Ancient Rib. That's totally fine. Next step is to just desecrate it. For me, I don't need to activate any sort of omen because it will always add a prefix since my suffix is already filled and it's not filled on modifiers. So we'll just add these desecration. There we go. The next step for me is to just slam it. Obviously, I could go and desecrate and reveal accuracy to block accuracy. That is something you could do, but Omen of Lights are almost worth 10 divines at this point, and I don't think it's worth it in terms of me, but you can always calculate that yourself. Do you think it's worth using an Omen of Light to block accuracy? Because if you get accuracy, your thing is bricked, and that is what it is. However, do you also want to have to use an Omen of Light to then use another Ancient Rib or whatever? And it's possible that you don't hit accuracy when you go to desecrate, so you got an Omen of Light anyways, and it's kind of unfortunate. So I'm just going to slam this and see what we get. Hopefully we get 2 tier 2 flats. If we don't, it is what it is. So we got a tier 4 fire, and then we got increased evasion rating. Not too bad, not the greatest, not the worst, but it is what it is. And now the next step is to just reveal at the Well of Souls. So once you're at the Well of Souls, depending on the value of your item, you'll definitely want to use an Omen of Abyssal Echoes. These aren't that expensive this league. However, depending on what league you're in, they might be a little bit more expensive, so it might not be worth it depending on the item you're crafting. Then you're just going to throw it in and pray you get one of those flats or whatever modifier you want. In my terms, I want tier 1 lightning hopefully, but any sort of flat will do. We didn't get a tier 1 flat, unfortunate, but we got physical damage to attacks, which is totally fine. So I've completed my craft. I got 2 flats, which was quite lucky because you never know. I could have got something like evasion rating and accuracy. I could Omen of Whittling from here or Omen of Light. I'm not going to because I don't really care that much, but we can see we've got quite a decent item now. Let's just price check it just to see. Again, we saw at the beginning that we could buy one for 140 divines. Our total cost right now is roughly 90 divines, and that would be about the expected cost. So let's look at the tier 1 attack speed and then as well as these, and then we'll type in the increased critical damage bonus, and we have that 140 divine one as well. So this is the trade site, and that's that same 140 divine one that we saw. His has tier 3 fire as well as tier 2 physical, but he has a desecrated +2 melee skills. So his is a little bit different than mine. I'd probably post mine around 200 divines just to see if it's sold, but that's basically essentially what it is. I could have just bought this for 140 divines. Granted, I made, 40 to 50 divines if this does sell for 140 divines, but the margins on it just aren't there for me if I wanted to, seriously profit craft these. But that's essentially how I determine if an item is worthy of profit crafting. I did everything in game for you step by step so you could show it, but you could do it very quickly, and the more experience you get, you can do it before you even have to craft anything, before anything's in your inventory, before you spend any divines, just so you know your expected cost. You can easily calculate, okay, my magic base costs 20 divines, I gotta get 3 of those. That's gonna cost me 60 divines in total. I need 3 fracturing orbs minimum to get 1 fracture. That's gonna cost me another 20 divines. We're at an 80 divine cost. If I hit this specific fracture, I can then calculate how many chaos orbs is it going to cost me. Okay, it's going to cost me what we saw, roughly 270, so roughly 35 divines. My total cost now is roughly 105 divines. My completed sale was, anywhere between 120 to 140 divines. Is it really worth it? What if you don't and get any good modifiers on your next ones, or you have to use something like an Omen of Light? You take those into consideration and you're starting to burn currency super quick, and you can lose money instead of make money on your profit crafting method. And again, it's important to note that you can always make currency at any point during a craft. You saw that when I hit that fracture, my expected value was to hit one of those 3, and I only hit 1. If I just sold the fractured base, I'd make probably the same amount of currency as the completed one. Now, obviously, if you get lucky and you get all tier 1s, it will start to sell for very high amounts of currency, and that's typically what you're waiting for. You produce these in mass until you get that one lucky hit. You get that lucky hit when that perfected exile and it's 2 tier 1 flats, and then I desecrate for another 3rd tier 1 flats. You'll be able to sell it for anywhere, from 1,000 to 2,500 divines, depending on what sort of, item you're crafting. And it's essentially up to you. Do you really enjoy sitting there chaos orbing? Because sometimes it could cost a lot of chaos orbs. We saw for this one, it's 270, and that's not too bad. I would say that's kind of like the average for some things. But if you're doing something like an amulet and you're spamming for +3 projectile skills, sometimes it can cost 1,200 to 1,300 chaos orbs as your expected value. I left the latter part of this video unedited because I wanted to kind of let you see the total process, and I wanted to do it while you're actually learning at the same time. But everything that I did for this glove craft, again, I want to repeat, you can calculate your expected cost before doing it. That's pretty much it for the video. Let me know what you guys want to see next. I hope you learned something. Take it easy, Exiles. I'll catch you in the next one.